My name is Margaret Ellis. I am 62 years old. At 3:42 on a Sunday afternoon in May, my daughter-in-law stood in front of 37 guests at her baby shower, lifted my gift bag between two fingers like it might stain her manicure, and said, "Oh, this must be from Margaret. It feels practical." Everyone laughed. Not loudly at first, just a ripple. The kind of soft, polite laughter people use when cruelty is wrapped in pastel tissue paper and served beside lemon cake. We were in the garden room at the Fairmont Club in Lexington, Kentucky, surrounded by blush balloons, white roses, gold-rimmed plates, champagne flutes filled with sparkling cider, and a dessert table with a sign that said, "Baby Bennett is already so loved." My son, Andrew, stood near the back with his hands in his pockets, smiling awkwardly, not enough to join the joke, not enough to stop it. That had become his specialty. Almost offending me, almost noticing, almost being the son I raised. My daughter-in-law, Savannah, was 8 months pregnant and glowing in a pale pink dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She had blonde hair styled in loose waves, pearl earrings, and the kind of effortless softness that took 3 hours and professional lighting. Her mother, Diane Caldwell, sat in the front row wearing cream linen in an expression that told everyone she considered this shower a social event, not a family gathering. Savannah looked into the gift bag. Inside was a hand-knitted cream baby blanket, a set of cotton burp cloths, a small silver rattle that had belonged to Andrew as a baby, and an envelope. The envelope was tucked beneath the blanket. She did not see it. Or maybe she saw it and assumed it held a $20 check. Savannah lifted the blanket first. "Oh," she said, stretching the word, "handmade." Diane smiled tightly. "How sweet, very old-fashioned." Savannah unfolded one burp cloth and held it up. "And practical." More laughter. Then Savannah glanced toward my side of the room. I was sitting at a small round table near the service doors with Andrew's Aunt Ruth, 2 elderly neighbors from my church, and a woman from Savannah's yoga studio who had clearly been placed there because she came alone and no one knew what to do with her. Savannah smiled at me. "Thank you, Margaret. I'm sure we'll use these for spit up." The room laughed again. My hands rested in my lap. I could feel the calluses near my thumb from years of working in the library archive. I could feel the thin gold wedding band I still wore even though my husband had been gone for 9 years. I could feel the seam of my navy dress, the one I had bought on clearance and hemmed myself because it was a little too long and I did not want to pay a tailor. Savannah placed my blanket on the gift table beneath a tower of imported baby bottles, monogrammed onesies, designer diaper bags, a gold baby bracelet from Diane, and a luxury stroller that required 3 people and a YouTube video to collapse. Then she looked back at the guests and said, "Honestly, we told everyone not to go overboard. Some people took that very seriously." This time, the laughter was louder. Andrew looked at the floor. I did not cry. I did not stand up. I did not explain that the yarn had been bought with care, that I had knitted the blanket during long evenings when my fingers ached, that the silver rattle had been polished twice, that the envelope beneath the blanket contained a cashier's receipt proving I had already paid the hospital deposit. Savannah and Andrew did not know they could not cover. I just picked up my tea, took one slow sip, and counted 7 seconds. What they didn't know was that 3 days earlier, I had received a call from the billing office at St. Catherine's Medical Center. Not because I was rich, not because I was flashy, because I was listed as Andrew's emergency family contact from years ago, and because the hospital had been trying to reach him about a maternity billing issue he had ignored for 2 weeks. What Savannah did not know was that her insurance pre-authorization had changed after Andrew switched jobs without understanding the waiting period. What Diane did not know was that the private maternity suite she had bragged about all afternoon required an advance payment that neither family had actually secured. And what none of them knew was that the 2 poor mother-in-law they were laughing at had walked into the billing office on Friday morning with a cashier's check and paid $18,740 so my granddaughter could be born without her parents being handed a financial crisis at the hospital desk. My gift was not cheap. It was invisible. And invisible gifts are the easiest ones for ungrateful people to mock until the receipt comes due. This is that story. Before I tell you how my daughter-in-law learned that modest does not mean broke, And quiet does not mean empty-handed. Tell me where you are watching or listening from, and what time it is there. I always wonder who hears stories like this, while remembering the moment someone mistook their humility for lack. And if you connect with stories about women who were betrayed, underestimated, humiliated, and quietly took their power back, like and subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Some women do not announce what they gave. Some women let the bill show who paid it. I grew up in Frankfort, Kentucky, in a white house near the river, with peeling shutters, a vegetable garden, and a front porch where my mother shelled peas into a dented metal bowl every summer evening. My father worked for the state highway department. My mother worked at the public library. We did not have money in a way people photographed. We had enough, most months, and when we did not, my mother stretched soup, and my father fixed things other families replaced. The word poor never frightened me, but the word waste did. My mother taught me that money should know where it was going. My father taught me that tools should be put back clean. My grandmother taught me that a gift did not become better because it was expensive, and a person did not become better because she could afford to be careless. I married Thomas Ellis when I was 24. He was a mechanic with kind eyes, broad hands, and a laugh that made ordinary rooms feel less ordinary. We bought a small brick ranch house on Rowan Street with 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, and a maple tree in the backyard. We raised one son there, Andrew Thomas Ellis, who arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning after 18 hours of labor and immediately became the center of my husband's universe. Andrew was a sweet child. That is important. He was not born cruel. He was not born weak. He was not born the kind of man who would let his wife humiliate his mother while he inspected the floor. He was funny, curious, gentle with animals, and prone to losing his shoes in places shoes had no business being. He loved books about trains, peanut butter sandwiches cut diagonally, and the little silver rattle my mother gave him after he was born. That rattle became the symbolic object in this story. It was sterling silver, small enough for a baby's hand, with a dent near the handle from the day Andrew dropped it onto the kitchen tile while Thomas was making pancakes. My mother had given it to us in a blue velvet pouch. She said, "Silver tarnishes when neglected. So do families." At the time, I thought that was dramatic. I understand it now. Thomas and I were never wealthy, but we were careful. He ran a repair shop with his brother for 17 years. I worked at the county library, first at the circulation desk, then in archives. My work was quiet, steady, and invisible to people who thought success came with conference badges and corner offices. I helped preserve old newspapers, family records, birth notices, cemetery maps, land deeds, church minutes, and photographs of people long gone whose names still mattered to someone. I loved that work. Maybe because I understood what it meant to be overlooked until someone needed proof. When Thomas died at 57 from a heart attack in the garage, my life narrowed overnight. Andrew was 28 then, living in Louisville, working in medical device sales, and engaged to a woman named Savannah Caldwell. Savannah came from money that knew how to introduce itself. Her father, Richard Caldwell, owned a chain of outpatient physical therapy clinics. Her mother, Diane, sat on charity boards, hosted luncheons, and spoke in a voice soft enough to make judgment sound like concern. Savannah had grown up with summer camps, ski trips, boutique clothes, private school, and the kind of family photos where everyone wore linen near water. When Andrew brought her home the first time, she was polite. Very polite. She complimented my curtains, my iced tea, and the sweet little neighborhood. She looked around the house like she was visiting a preserved exhibit about modest living. When I served chicken casserole, she said, "This reminds me of something my nanny used to make." I laughed because I thought she meant it kindly. Andrew squeezed her knee under the table. I saw that. Not a warning, a correction. There is a difference. The family hierarchy formed slowly after that. Savannah's family became the impressive side. I became the humble side. Diane hosted engagement brunches, bridal luncheons, and holiday cocktail parties. I brought deviled eggs, repaired hymns, remembered medication allergies, and wrote thank you notes. Richard Caldwell called me salt of the earth twice, which always sounded less like praise and more like a box he could put me in. At Andrew and Savannah's wedding, Diane gave a toast about, quote, joining 2 beautiful families. Then she spent 4 minutes naming Caldwell achievements and one sentence saying, "Margaret raised a wonderful son with such simple values." Simple. That word followed me for 7 years. Simple house. Simple job. Simple taste. Simple life. The first time Savannah openly embarrassed me was at their first Christmas after marriage. She hosted in their new townhouse, which Diane had helped furnish. I brought a homemade pecan pie because Andrew loved it. Savannah placed it on the counter behind a catered dessert tower and said, "Oh, that's so sweet. Andrew can have it later when everyone leaves." I said nothing. After dinner, I found the pie still in its carrier in the laundry room because there had been no space on the dessert table. Andrew apologized quietly while walking me to my car. "She didn't mean anything." I looked at him. Then why did it mean something? He had no answer. The second time was at a baby announcement dinner after Savannah's first pregnancy test turned positive. They invited both families to a private room at a restaurant. Diane cried. Richard ordered champagne for everyone except Savannah. I hugged Andrew and gave Savannah a small pair of booties I had knitted years earlier and kept in my cedar chest because some hopes arrive before invitations. Savannah smiled and said, "Oh, handmade already." Diane said, "That's very thoughtful, Margaret." The booties never appeared again. A week later, Savannah miscarried. That changed everything. I went to their house with soup and flowers, but Savannah would not see me. Diane said Savannah needed her own people. I left the soup on the porch and cried in my car, not because I was excluded from grief, but because Andrew came outside, hugged me, and whispered, "She just needs time," while looking back at the door like he was afraid to be caught loving me. There were 2 more losses after that, one at 8 weeks, one at 11. By the time Savannah became pregnant again, successfully this time, everyone was afraid to breathe too loudly near the hope. I understood that. I truly did. Loss can make people sharp. Fear can make them selfish. Pregnancy after grief can turn celebration into something desperate and heavily decorated. But pain does not give anyone the right to humiliate another person. The pregnancy changed Savannah from guarded to grand. At 12 weeks, Diane hosted a quote, rainbow brunch. At 18 weeks, they announced it was a girl with a cake that released pink sugar pearls when cut. At 22 weeks, Savannah posted maternity photos in a field wearing a flowing dress and holding her stomach like she was starring in a fragrance commercial. At 26 weeks, the registry arrived. 3 pages. Luxury stroller. Bassinet. Designer diaper bag. Baby monitor system. Organic crib mattress. Bottle sterilizer. Cashmere baby blanket. Monogrammed nursery hamper. A rocking chair that cost more than my first used car. I opened the registry at my kitchen table and felt my chest tighten. Not because I resented the baby. Never that. Because I knew I could not afford what they expected, and I knew they would notice. I had enough money, but not the kind that looks good at showers. That distinction matters. After Thomas died, I sold the repair shop share, paid off our house, kept working, saved carefully, and lived modestly. I had a retirement account, a small investment portfolio, emergency savings, and no debt. I still clipped coupons. I still drove a 12-year-old Toyota. I still hemmed my own dresses. I still bought store-brand oatmeal because I could taste no difference. Savannah saw the oatmeal. She did not see the accounts. Andrew should have known better. But Andrew had changed in the atmosphere of the Caldwell family. He had learned to speak in their language. Appearances, networks, lifestyle, optics. He had begun calling my house cozy in a tone that made it sound like a compliment he was embarrassed to give. He wore expensive shoes now. He leased a car he could barely justify. He treated Diane's approval like a second paycheck. When I asked what they still needed for the baby, he said, "Mom, honestly, just come. Savannah's registry is pretty much handled." That was his way of saying, "Please do not buy something off list and embarrass me." I said, "I'm making a blanket." He paused. "Oh, you loved yours." "I know, Mom, it's just Savannah has a certain nursery style. A baby can have more than one blanket." He laughed softly. "Of course." Soft laughs often hide discomfort. I knitted the blanket anyway. Cream merino wool, washable, soft, with a simple cable border. I made matching burp cloths from cotton flannel, because babies do not care whether spit up lands on imported linen. I polished Andrew's silver rattle until the little dent near the handle shone gently. I placed it all in a pale blue gift bag because I had no interest in fighting the color theme. Then came the phone call from St. Catherine's. It was Thursday at 4:32. I had just returned from work and was watering the basil plant in my kitchen window when my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. "Is this Margaret Ellis?" "Yes." "This is Helen Mercer from Patient Financial Services at St. Catherine's Medical Center. I'm calling regarding Andrew Ellis and Savannah Ellis's maternity account." I stiffened. "Is Savannah all right?" "As far as I know, yes, ma'am. This is a billing matter. You were listed as Andrew Ellis's emergency family contact from a previous hospital account, and we have been unable to reach him regarding a time-sensitive deposit issue." "I'm sorry, a deposit issue?" Helen hesitated. "I can only discuss details if they have authorized you or if you are making payment on their behalf. But the account has an upcoming scheduled delivery plan, and there is a coverage gap due to an insurance transition." My hand tightened around the phone. Insurance transition. Andrew had changed jobs in February. He told me it was a better opportunity, higher commission potential, better title. I had asked about health benefits because Savannah was pregnant. He said everything was handled. Of course he had. "Can I come in tomorrow?" I asked. Helen sounded relieved. "Yes, ma'am. We open at 8. I called Andrew after hanging up. He did not answer. I texted, "St. Catherine's called me about billing. Is everything okay?" He replied 2 hours later, "All good. Just paperwork. Don't worry." That reply told me to worry. The next morning, I took a personal day and drove to St. Catherine's Medical Center with a folder of documents, my checkbook, and the kind of calm women develop when panic has work to do. Helen Mercer met me in a small office near admissions. She was in her 50s, with tired eyes and a kind voice. Because I was not legally entitled to everything, she explained carefully. Andrew had not completed updated insurance coordination. Savannah's preferred provider arrangements had shifted. The private maternity suite and certain expected delivery costs required payment or confirmation before admission. Some charges would eventually be processed, some might be reimbursed, some might not. The immediate amount needed to secure their planned delivery arrangement and prevent the account from being flagged was $18,740. I stared at the number. Not because I could not pay it, because Andrew had said, "Don't worry. Have they been notified?" I asked. "Yes, multiple times. We spoke once with Mr. Ellis. He said his mother-in-law's office was handling it." "Diane." I almost laughed. "Has his mother-in-law paid anything?" Helen checked. "No. Of course not. Diane paid for balloon arches, brunches, and reputation. Quiet bills did not photograph well." "Can I pay it?" I asked. Helen blinked. "Yes, ma'am. But you should understand that payments made on another adult's account." "I understand." "Would you like to speak with them first?" I thought about Andrew saying, "Don't worry." I thought about Savannah, 8 months pregnant after years of loss, potentially arriving at the hospital and being told her planned arrangements were not in place. I thought about my granddaughter, who had done nothing except exist behind all this adult vanity. "No," I said. "I'll pay." I went to the bank and obtained a cashier's check because I wanted the record clean. Then I returned to the billing office and paid $18,740. Helen handed me a receipt. I placed it in an envelope. Then I asked her to note the account. "Please do not announce this unless they ask who paid." Helen looked at me. "Are you sure?" "No," I said, "but I am certain." There is a difference. I drove home, sat in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes, and cried. Not because of the money. Because I knew they would not know. Because I knew they would still laugh at the blanket. Because I knew I was making a choice that protected them from a crisis they might later use to insult me. Then I went inside, made tea, and tucked the hospital receipt beneath the blanket in the gift bag. The baby shower was 2 days later. Diane had chosen the Fairmont Club because, according to Savannah, after everything we've been through, this baby deserves beauty. I agreed with that sentence in principle. I simply disagreed with the way beauty seemed to require everyone else's financial ranking. I arrived 15 minutes early. A valet looked surprised when I stepped out of my old Toyota. I gave him the keys and tipped $5, which was fair, though I could feel Diane's cousin noticing. The garden room was already decorated. Savannah's name was written in gold calligraphy on a welcome sign. The favor table held tiny jars of honey labeled Sweet Baby Bennett, though the baby's last name would be Ellis. Savannah had said Caldwell family branding was just more recognizable. I placed my gift on the gift table. It looked small among the towers, I will admit that. A blue bag with tissue paper beside enormous wrapped boxes and designer bags. My mother's voice came back to me. A gift does not become better because it is expensive. I sat near the service doors because that was where my name card had been placed. Margaret Ellis. No Grandma Margaret. No Andrew's mother. Just my name near the coffee urn. Aunt Ruth, Thomas's older sister, looked at the seating chart and said, "Well, isn't this educational?" I smiled. Ruth. What? I can read a room. She could. Diane greeted me with a kiss near my cheek. Margaret, how lovely. You made it. As invited. Her smile tightened. I just meant with the drive. It was 20 minutes. Yes, well. She moved on. The shower began with games. Guess the baby food. Measure the belly. Advice cards. Name suggestions. A little station where guests wrote wishes for the baby on cream paper shaped like clouds. I wrote, "May you always know love is more than display." Then came gifts. It was a performance. Savannah opened each present while Diane announced the giver. A stroller from Diane and Richard. Applause. A designer diaper bag from Claire, Savannah's best friend. Gasps. A full nursery monitor system from the Caldwell cousins. More applause. A cashmere blanket from Morgan, Diane's sister. Savannah pressed it to her face and said, "Oh my gosh, this is exactly the texture." Then came my gift. Diane glanced at the tag and smiled. "And this one is from Margaret." Savannah lifted the bag. Practical, handmade, spit up. Some people took not going overboard very seriously. Laughter. Andrew, standing at the back, looking at the floor. I watched my son in that moment and understood that motherhood does not end when your child becomes an adult. It simply changes the shape of heartbreak. When they are little, you worry they will fall. When they are grown, you sometimes watch them stand upright and still fail. The envelope stayed inside the bag, unopened. After the shower, Andrew walked me to my car, that old pattern again, private apology, public silence. "Mom," he said, "Savannah was just joking." I opened my car door. "No, Andrew, she was performing." He sighed. "She's under a lot of stress." "So am I." He looked startled. That told me more than I wanted to know. "You?" he asked. I laughed softly. "Goodbye, Andrew." He touched my arm. "Mom, please don't be upset. It was a beautiful shower." "Yes," I said. "It was very decorated." I drove home with the silver rattle no longer in my possession and a strange emptiness in my chest. The call came 4 days later. Not from Andrew. From Diane. That alone told me something had gone wrong. I was at work in the archive room, labeling a box of land records from the 1940s, when my phone buzzed repeatedly in my pocket. I stepped into the hallway. Diane Caldwell. I almost let it ring. Then I answered. "Hello, Diane." Her voice was strained. "Margaret, have you spoken to Andrew?" "Not today." "There seems to be some confusion with the hospital." I leaned against the wall. "What kind of confusion?" "Billing confusion. Apparently, there was some issue with Savannah's delivery account, but now the hospital says it's been paid." I said nothing, Diane continued. "They won't tell me who paid because I'm not authorized, which is frankly absurd, considering I am the baby's grandmother." I closed my eyes. The baby's grandmother. As if there were only one. I see. Andrew says he doesn't know anything about it. Savannah is very upset because she thought perhaps my husband handled it, but Richard says he did not. How is Savannah? She's fine, just anxious. This kind of thing is terrible for her blood pressure. That is true. Diane paused. Margaret, did you pay something? There it was, not gratitude. Investigation. Yes, I said. The line went quiet. How much? The amount required. How much, Margaret? I looked through the archive room window at a table stacked with old deeds and birth records. $18,740. Diane inhaled sharply. You paid that? Yes. When? Friday before the shower. Another silence. Then, softer, why didn't you say something? I almost laughed. Because at the shower, your daughter held my blanket like it was proof of poverty. Because you sat in the front row smiling while they mocked cotton burp cloths. Because Andrew has learned to accept private rescue and offer public embarrassment in return. Instead, I said, because it was not a party gift. Diane had no answer. I continued, the receipt is in the envelope inside the gift bag, beneath the blanket. Oh my God, she whispered, not to me, to the room she was in. Then I heard Savannah's voice in the background. What? What is it? Diane muffled the phone, but not enough. Your hospital deposit, Margaret paid it. Savannah said, what? Then Andrew's voice. Mom paid what? I hung up. Not dramatically, just enough. I need to pause here for a second. If you have ever had someone mock what they could see while quietly benefiting from what they could not, then you know exactly what that moment felt like. It was not about a blanket. It was not about a baby shower. It was about people assuming modest meant empty and silence meant small. If this story is hitting close to home, leave a comment and tell me what moment made you stop letting people confuse humility with lack. And if you have not already, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. The quiet part is over. Andrew arrived at my house that evening at 7:10. Alone. I saw his car pull into the driveway through the lace curtain in my living room. For a moment, I remembered him at 7 years old, running up the same walkway with mud on his shoes and a school paper in his hand, yelling, Mom, look, before he even reached the porch. This Andrew walked slowly. He knocked, though he still had a key. That mattered. I opened the door. He looked exhausted. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He entered the living room, looked around at the old sofa, the bookshelves, the framed photo of Thomas on the mantel, and for the first time in years, I saw him see the house not as small but as steady. He held the envelope. The hospital receipt was inside. Savannah had apparently found it. His voice broke. Why didn't you tell me? I sat in the armchair. You told me not to worry. He flinched. I didn't know it was that bad. You did know there was a problem. He sat on the edge of the sofa. I thought Diane was handling it. Did you ask her? He looked down. No. Did you call the hospital back? No. Did you tell Savannah? No. Did you let me get mocked at the shower while knowing there might be a bill problem? His face crumpled. Mom. No, Andrew. Answer. He closed his eyes. Yes. The word landed between us like something heavy and overdue. I nodded. Thank you for telling the truth. He looked up quickly. I am so sorry. For what specifically? He stared at me. That question always reveals whether a person wants repair or relief. He swallowed. I'm sorry I didn't stop Savannah at the shower. I waited. I'm sorry I let her family treat you like you were less than them. I waited. I'm sorry I called your gifts practical like that was a bad thing. You didn't say that. I thought it. That one hurt, he continued, tears in his eyes. I'm sorry I didn't call the hospital back. I'm sorry I assumed Diane would handle it because her family handles visible things. I'm sorry I let you handle the invisible thing again. Again. That word told me he had finally found the pattern. I leaned back. When did you start being embarrassed by me? He shook his head. I'm not embarrassed by you. Andrew? His mouth tightened. Then he whispered, when I started wanting them to think I belonged. That was the saddest, honest thing he had ever said to me. I looked toward Thomas's photograph. His eyes in the picture were kind and steady. Your father belonged everywhere he acted with integrity, I said. He did not need people with monogrammed napkins to confirm it. Andrew wiped his face. I know. No, I said gently. You are learning. He nodded. Savannah wants to come apologize. Does she? He looked away. Diane told her she should. That is not the same. No? I looked at the envelope in his hands. Andrew. I paid because my granddaughter should not arrive into a billing crisis created by adult vanity. I did not pay to purchase respect, but I will not continue giving where I am publicly diminished. His face went pale. I understand. I hope so. He stood after a while and placed the envelope on the coffee table. You should keep the receipt. I have a copy. For the first time that night, he almost smiled. Of course you do. Yes, I said. Your mother is practical. He winced, but nodded. The public reveal happened 2 nights later at Diane Caldwell's house. I did not plan to attend, Diane insisted. Then Andrew asked. Then Savannah sent a text that read, Margaret, I owe you an apology and would like to say it in person. Not perfect, but direct enough. I agreed under one condition. Everyone who laughed at the shower does not need to be there, I told Andrew. He hesitated. It's just immediate family. In Caldwell language, immediate family meant Diane, Richard, Savannah, Andrew, Savannah's sister Lauren, and apparently Diane's sister Morgan, because she had been, quote, so involved with the shower. I brought Aunt Ruth. Because I am practical, not foolish. Diane's house was a red brick colonial on a tree-lined street with white columns, a circular driveway, and lamps that made every window glow like a magazine. The living room had cream furniture no one seemed allowed to relax on. A silver tray of tea sat untouched on the coffee table. Savannah stood when I entered. She looked different without the shower audience. Smaller, paler. Her hair was pulled back. Her hands rested on her belly. For the first time, I saw not the polished daughter-in-law who mocked my gift, but a frightened, pregnant woman who had built too much of her identity on being admired. That did not excuse her. It simply made her human. Margaret, she said. Savannah. Diane gestured toward the sofa. Please sit. Aunt Ruth sat beside me like a small judge in church pearls. No one knew what to do with her. Good. Andrew stood near the fireplace. Richard Caldwell sat in a leather chair, looking deeply uncomfortable. Lauren stared at her phone. Morgan, Diane's sister, avoided my eyes. Savannah began. I want to apologize for the shower. I waited. She took a breath. I made fun of your gift. Yes. I called it practical. Yes. I let people laugh. You encouraged them. Her face flushed. Yes, I encouraged them. Aunt Ruth murmured, progress. Diane shot her a look. Aunt Ruth smiled. Savannah continued, voice shaking. I thought you were giving something small because you didn't understand what we needed. I looked at her. No, Savannah. You thought I gave something small because you thought I was small. Her eyes filled. Andrew looked down. Diane whispered, Margaret. I turned to her. No. Let that sentence stand. The room went quiet. Savannah's lips trembled. You're right. That surprised me. She placed one hand over her stomach. I have been horrible to you. No one moved. I thought because my family had more, we knew more. I thought your house, your car, your clothes, your handmade things meant you were behind. Aunt Ruth said, behind what, dear? Debt? I almost smiled. Richard Caldwell coughed into his hand. Savannah let out one broken laugh, then cried. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry I humiliated you. I'm sorry I treated your blanket like it was cheap. I'm sorry I didn't even look in the envelope. I'm sorry you paid a bill I should have known about while I was opening gifts I could brag about. That was specific enough to matter, I nodded slowly. Thank you. Diane spoke next, reluctantly but clearly. I also owe you an apology. I looked at her. She folded her hands in her lap. I placed you at that table. Yes. I allowed the tone. You helped set it. Her face tightened. Then she nodded. I helped set it. I have treated you as though you were less sophisticated. Aunt Ruth said, there's a $10 word. Diane inhaled through her nose. I was wrong. I said nothing, she continued. When the hospital called, I assumed someone else would handle it because I was focused on appearances. You handled the actual need. That sentence was almost worth the drive. Richard Caldwell leaned forward. Margaret, I was unaware of the billing issue, but I should have been aware. I also heard comments at the shower and did not stop them. I apologize. His apology was stiff, but it existed. Then Morgan, Diane's sister, said, well, I don't think anyone meant harm. It was a joke. Aunt Ruth sat up. Oh, finally. I wondered who was going to embarrass herself first. The room froze. Morgan blinked. Excuse me? Aunt Ruth smiled. You heard me. Diane said, Ruth. No, Aunt Ruth said. I am 68 years old. I wore support hose to this mansion, and I am not sitting through another woman explaining humiliation as humor. I covered my mouth. Andrew looked like he might choke. Morgan's face reddened. Savannah looked at her aunt and said, quietly, It wasn't a joke. I was mean. That was the moment the apology became real, not because she apologized to me, because she stopped someone else from minimizing it. I looked at Savannah for a long moment. Then I opened my purse and removed a small box. Her eyes widened. What is that? The rattle, I said. She looked confused. It was in the gift bag. No, I said. You left it behind at the club. Her face crumpled. I continued. One of the servers found it under the gift table and called me because my name was on the card. Andrew closed his eyes. I held the box in my lap. This belonged to Andrew. My mother gave it to him when he was born. I brought it because I wanted my granddaughter to have something from her father's childhood and from the women before me. Savannah began crying harder. I didn't know. No, I said. You didn't look. That sentence did not need volume. It filled the room anyway. I opened the box. The silver rattle rested in blue velvet, polished and small, the dent near the handle catching the light. I looked at Savannah. I am willing for your daughter to have it, but not as a prop. Not as a thing to misplace under a table. Not as evidence that I provided something cute after the real gifts were opened. Savannah wiped her face with both hands. I understand. I handed it to Andrew first. His fingers closed around it, and for 1 second, he looked like the little boy who once shook it in his high chair while Thomas laughed. Then he gave it to Savannah. She held it carefully, not like a cheap thing, like a breakable one. That was the beginning, not the end. People think apologies repair everything immediately, because stories need clean endings. Real families are messier. Savannah did apologize, yes. Diane did become more careful, yes. Andrew did begin calling the hospital himself, checking insurance himself, and asking questions before assuming someone else with a better dining room had handled the unglamorous part. But trust returns slowly, if it returns at all. My granddaughter, Emily Rose Ellis, was born 12 days later at St. Catherine's Medical Center at 5:18 in the morning. 7 pounds, 1 ounce. Dark hair, loud cry, perfect hands. Savannah had a difficult labor that ended in an emergency C-section. Andrew called me at 2:20 in the morning, voice shaking. Mom, can you come? I was already dressed. At the hospital, Diane was in the waiting room holding a designer tote and looking terrified. Her money, her manners, her event planning, her cream furniture, none of it mattered under hospital lights. She looked at me when I arrived and said, I don't know what to do. I sat beside her. Then we wait. She nodded. At 5:42, Andrew came through the doors crying. She's here, he said. Diane stood too quickly. I stood slower. Andrew looked at both of us. Savannah's okay. The baby's okay. Diane sobbed. I closed my eyes and said a prayer that had no polished words in it. Later, when I entered Savannah's room, she was pale, exhausted, and holding Emily against her chest. The baby wore a hospital hat and had one tiny fist tucked under her chin. Savannah looked at me. Margaret, she whispered. I came closer. She's beautiful. Savannah's eyes filled. Thank you. I knew she meant more than the compliment. I nodded. Andrew stood beside the bed, one hand on Savannah's shoulder, the other touching Emily's blanket. The blanket. My cream knitted blanket. It was draped over the hospital bassinet. I looked at it. Savannah followed my gaze. I asked Andrew to bring it, she said. It's the softest one. That was not everything, but it was something. When Emily was 2 weeks old, Savannah invited me over on a Wednesday afternoon without Diane, without guests, without performance. The house was messy in the way newborn houses are supposed to be. Bottles on the counter, burp cloths everywhere, laundry unfolded, Savannah's hair in a knot, no makeup, no pastel perfection, She opened the door, holding Emily and wearing one of my cotton burp cloths over her shoulder. "Come in," she said. I did. For the first time, her house felt like a home instead of a set. She made tea badly. I drank it anyway. Emily slept in my arms for 40 minutes while Savannah told me about breastfeeding, pain, fear, night sweats, and the strange grief of wanting a baby so badly and then feeling overwhelmed once she arrived. I listened, not as a woman she had mocked, as a woman who knew motherhood could humble anyone. At one point she said, I was cruel because I was afraid. I looked at her. Fear explains some things. It does not excuse them. I know. Do you? She nodded. I'm learning. That was honest enough. Andrew came home early that day and found me rocking Emily in the chair near the window. He stood in the doorway and smiled. Not the awkward smile from the shower, but a real one. There are my girls, he said. I looked at him over my glasses. Careful. He laughed softly. Sorry, there are 3 women who might outvote me forever. Better? Savannah smiled. That moment did not erase the shower. It did not erase the laughter, the cheap jokes, the spit-up comment, the seating chart, the hospital bill, or Andrew's silence. But it created a new record, and I believe in records. Several months later, Diane hosted a small baptism lunch. I was wary. Aunt Ruth was ready. This time, my place card was beside Savannah. It said Grandma Margaret. I stared at it longer than necessary. Diane noticed. I hope that's all right, she said. I looked at her. It is accurate. She gave a small smile. During lunch, one of Diane's friends complimented the baby's blanket. Oh, that is gorgeous, the woman said. Where did you find it? Savannah did not hesitate. Margaret made it, she said. It's Emily's favorite. The woman turned to me. You're very talented. I smiled. Thank you. Then Savannah added, and Margaret helped us more than anyone before Emily was born. The table quieted slightly, not awkwardly, attentively. Diane lifted her water glass. She did. Andrew looked at me. More than we deserved. That sentence landed gently. I did not need everyone to know the amount. I did not need the receipt passed around like evidence. I did not need Diane's social circle to understand the private humiliation that came before the public respect. But I needed my son to stop hiding the truth because it made other people uncomfortable. He did. That was enough for that day. I still live in my small brick house on Rowan Street. I still drive my old Toyota. I still work in the library archive 3 days a week because I like the smell of paper and the stubbornness of names. I still buy store-brand oatmeal. I still hem my dresses when they need it. Savannah once asked why I did not move somewhere more fitting now that I was retired enough to enjoy myself. I said, this house fits me. She did not argue. Progress. I did set one financial boundary after Emily's birth, no more invisible rescues. If Andrew and Savannah need help, they must ask directly, explain honestly, and accept that my answer may be no. I put that in words over dinner one evening while Emily slept in her carrier. Andrew nodded immediately. Savannah looked embarrassed, then nodded too. I understand, she said. Diane later tried to reimburse the hospital payment. She brought a check in a cream envelope and placed it on my kitchen table like a peace offering. I looked at the amount. $18, $740. I pushed it back. No? She looked surprised. Margaret, please. I did not pay it as a loan. I know, but Richard and I can cover it. I'm sure you can. Then why not let us? I looked at her carefully. Because if I take that check, you get to turn what I did into an accounting correction. I do not want reimbursement. I want memory. Her eyes filled. She understood. Not fully, perhaps, but enough. She took the check back. What should I do instead? She asked. I smiled faintly. Remember before you assume. She nodded. That was all. Now, when I visit Emily, the silver rattle sits on a shelf in her nursery beside a framed photo of Andrew as a baby. The cream blanket is usually somewhere less photogenic. On the rocking chair, in the laundry basket, tucked into the stroller, once under the dog, because Savannah turned around for 30 seconds and life humbled her again. The burp cloths were used constantly. I take private satisfaction in that. One afternoon, when Emily was 6 months old, Savannah called me laughing. Margaret, I need to apologize again. For what? These burp cloths are the best thing anyone gave us. I laughed too. Practical things often are. She said, I know that now. That is how people change sometimes. Not in grand speeches. In small admissions, repeated until they become character. The final lesson of this story is not that expensive gifts are shallow or handmade gifts are pure. I have seen love arrive in diamond bracelets and in casserole dishes. I have seen selfishness wrapped in tissue paper and generosity sent by wire transfer. The lesson is that people often judge value by what can be displayed, but some of the most important gifts never sit on the table. They happen in billing offices, in bank lines, in quiet decisions made before anyone knows there is a crisis. In the woman who pays the bill and still shows up with a blanket. My daughter-in-law told everyone I was too poor to attend her baby shower. Then my gift paid their hospital bill. And when the laughter faded, when the private maternity suite was secured, when my granddaughter came into the world under a blanket Savannah had once mocked, I understood something my mother tried to teach me years ago. A gift does not become better because it is expensive, but a person reveals herself by how she treats the gift before she knows what it cost. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know some of you have been judged by your clothes, your car, your house, your job, your accent, your age, or the quiet way you give. If Margaret's story reached you, I hope you remember that modest does not mean empty, and humble does not mean powerless. You do not have to decorate your generosity for people who only respect price tags. Subscribe to Ultimate Revenge for more stories about quiet women, family betrayal, silent comebacks, and the truth that finally shows up on the receipt. So tell me, if someone mocked your gift in front of everyone before realizing you had quietly paid the one bill they could not handle, would you explain yourself at the party, or would you let the receipt speak when the hospital called?